Do you feel that your practice isn't returning the results that you want? That other musicians seem to make more progress in less time while you're left feeling pretty frustrated at the results that you're getting? Well, in today's lesson, we're going to talk about the practice habits that great musicians have and what they're doing that makes their practice so effective. At the end of the lesson, I'll show you an exercise that I give to my own students who struggle with practice that helps them get more out of their practice time. So stick around to the end if you want to see that exercise. Let's get straight on with the lesson. If you want to develop your skills as a musician, consistency is king. It's well-established knowledge that if you want to develop a skill, then you should do that skill little and often, not one big block very infrequently. Although you might be able to learn a lot in a 3 or 4 hour session, the problem is retention. By the time you come to your next 3 or 4 hour session, most of what you have learned will have been forgotten. And therefore, you're going to have to spend the next 3 or 4 hour session relearning what you did a week ago. If you learn a small amount in a short period of time, but revisit that every single day in whatever amount of time you have, be that 5 minutes or less if you don't have 5 minutes, the fact that you're revisiting it is going to encourage you to remember it because you're using it. And therefore it'll stick a lot better and you won't have to spend time relearning stuff, and instead you can use whatever free time you have in the future to learn new things, and then you'll start to make progress. How does this look in reality? Because it's all well and good me saying that, you should play every day, but obviously we all have busy lives. How do you fit this thing in amongst everything else that you have to do? I don't tell people to practice for 10 minutes or an hour or half an hour or 45 minutes or anything like that. What I do is I tell them to pick up the guitar. It's not about the amount of time that you spend practicing, but actually just about the act of picking the instrument up and spending time with it, be that 10 seconds or 4 hours, whatever amount of free time that you have. If you need to keep track of that, get a chart, one of those X charts, and just make a cross every day and try not to break the chain. It's not about how long you pick up the guitar for, but making sure that you do it every single day in a consistent manner so that you build the habit of picking up the guitar and playing the guitar every single day. What will happen then is some days you'll pick it up and you will only be able to play for a minute because real life gets in the way. But other times, because the habit will have been built, you'll pick up the guitar thinking, I'll only play for 10 minutes, but you have 4 or 5 hours of free time, and before you know it, 4 or 5 hours have passed. And therefore, you'll make absolutely stacks of progress in that one really rare event where you do have that massive block of time. But you won't have to spend it relearning things because you've spent every day picking up the guitar, revisiting the stuff that you've learned the last time you had such an opportunity. So it really is about consistency. It's not about time. It's just making sure you pick up the guitar every single day. Great musicians understand how they learn best, and so should you if you want to make the most of your practice time. So what you need to do is figure out, how do you learn best? Some people learn really well in a very structured environment. They want everything spelt out from A to Z. Other people learn better in a more free-form environment where they can visit things that spike their interest as and when. Figure out where you sit in that spectrum so that you can take advantage and structure your practice sessions so that they fit your personality in the best possible way. If you're the kind of person who is highly conscientious, you should set up a strict practice routine that you can follow every day so that you just literally have to look at your piece of paper and go, okay, I'm doing X, Y, and Z, off I go. If you're less conscientious, like myself, then actually maybe you're better off saying, well, I'm trying to learn this blues lick, so I'm going to sit down and practice this blues lick until I'm bored, and then I'm going to move on to whatever other project I have going on at the same time, and I'll use my own internal sense of boredom and interest as my guide. As I said in the previous tip, consistency matters, so you're still going to have to be disciplined and turn up every single day, even if you're a very free-form creative person. You still need to turn up every day. You're going to have to learn to be conscientious in that manner. But aside from that, you can just use your own internal temperament to help guide you. Remember what I said, it is about picking up the guitar every day. It's not so much about having this really strict and structured practice plan that you have to follow. However, if you're the type of person who benefits from that kind of thing, make that your practice plan. Use a really strict and structured practice plan if that's the way that you learn best. It's worth remembering that this isn't some binary thing. You're either super freeform or super conscientious. It's not some binary equation. This is a spectrum. So You are probably neither of those extremes. You are probably somewhere in the middle, and therefore you need to experiment to figure out what works best for you. What works best for me, as somebody who sits somewhere in the middle of those two things, is to know what I'm working towards. So if that's a song, I know I'm working on this song, and I say when I sit down with the guitar, I'm going to work on this song and maybe these particular 3 phrases from it, but I don't have 10 minutes per phrase or anything very strict like that. I just let my own internal temperament guide me there. So if I get bored of the first phrase in a couple of minutes, that's fine. I'll go do one of the other 2 phrases because it's more important that I play. And particularly if I finish the other 2 phrases, I'm only left with one choice there at the end. So I have to practice the one that was boring until I crack it right. The point is, it's about experimentation. So maybe start with a really strict schedule, and if you don't follow it, figure out why you're not following it. Why am I falling apart here? And then get rid of the bits that don't work, keep the bits that do work, rerun the experiment and do the same thing again. Figure out what worked and what didn't, keep the bits that worked, get rid of the bits that didn't, and just keep experimenting with it until you find a system that works really well for you. If you want to get the most out of your practice time, it's important that you have a higher order goal that you're aiming towards. Great musicians don't just play the instrument without reason. They pick up the guitar because they have some reason to do so. It might be their career, it might be that it's a creative outlet for them and they have some creative goal that they're pursuing. Whatever it is, they have some higher order thing that they're aiming towards that is in itself intrinsically meaningful. And that's what motivates them to pick up the instrument and practice even when things are difficult. By ensuring that you have a higher order goal, you ensure that what you're doing is inherently meaningful and therefore is actually pleasurable in the process. And by making what you're working on pleasurable, you form a positive feedback loop that makes you desire to go pick up the instrument and carry on working with it because it's intrinsically pleasurable to do so. For me, the reason that playing guitar is meaningful is it is actually a very social thing. I really like to be around other musicians creating music or teaching, basically. Any opportunity to spend time with other musicians where we can make and share music together is inherently meaningful for me. Therefore, for me to make the most motivation appear when I need to practice, the best thing I can do is have a social reason to practice, whether that is have a band or a rehearsal coming up that I need to make sure that I'm on form for, or to have materials prepped for students so that I can demonstrate effectively and share my knowledge with them effectively. Whatever it is, there's that social pressure in some sense that makes me need to pick up the guitar and play, and it's very motivating to do that. And then when I get to go to that social engagement and I am competent and my practice has paid off, that is really rewarding and it's really meaningful, right? So by leveraging my practice, by having some external force to myself that is social, I can ensure that I will practice and spend time with the instrument. Now, it might not be that you find the social side of music the most compelling portion. Maybe for you it is a creative thing. Maybe it is a technical, physical achievement. Whatever it might be, it's important that you figure out what about guitar is meaningful for you, and then you structure your goals to encapsulate that source of meaning. By structuring your higher order goals to contain that source of meaning, you will be intrinsically motivated to pursue them, and when you achieve them, the internal reward that you get for that will be so great that you'll be motivated to set more goals, and then you form this positive feedback loop which results in perpetual progress. From these higher order goals, you can then figure out specific goals that you need to be pursuing in your practice sessions, and that is what we're going to talk about now. Once you know what your higher order goal is, you can actually start structuring specific goals that will take you towards that higher order goal and therefore getting that sense of meaning, right? So what you need to do is sit down and work on specifics, essentially. Great musicians don't sit down and just practice fluff. They're very, very specific when they sit down to practice. In order to figure out what specific goals you should be setting yourself, you need to take your higher order goal and break it up. Break it up into as many small pieces as you can so that you can then sit down and work on them in an individual practice session. You're not going to know the most direct route towards your goal because you don't know what you don't know yet. But if you sit down and you say, okay, I'm aiming towards writing an album. Well, what do I need to do to write an album? Okay, I need to write some songs. Okay, now I have 8 songs, say, and now I need to write a intro, a verse, a bridge, and a chorus, and a solo for my first song. Okay, well there's 5 really specific goals for the first song that you could actually sit down and do in one practice session. One practice session, I'll try and write an intro. Next practice session, I'll try and write a chorus. Whatever it ends up being, you don't have to do them in any particular order. The point is I have 5 very specific things there that I have to try and work on. Now I've really saved the best tip until last, and that is that the best musicians and the people who make the most progress with their practice are the people who work on what they cannot do. This is the biggest secret to improving at any skill. You should practice the things that you can't do at the moment. Don't spend time practicing things you can already do. That's a waste of time. Spend time on the things that you can't do, because that is where progress is to be found. The most direct route to your specific goal, and therefore to your higher order goal, is through the things that you can't do at the moment. By focusing on these things, you will make rapid progress because you're constantly on the edge of what you're capable of. And by sitting on that edge, which isn't comfortable, I'll admit it's kind of an uncomfortable place to be when you can't do something. But by sitting on that edge, you'll always be improving because you will eventually learn how to do the thing you can't do. And therefore, you'll make progress, right? That's the definition of progress, going from not being able to do something to being able to do it. Working on the things you can't do takes discipline, it takes tenacity. I often find my own students find this very difficult, and I also find this really difficult. It's quite a emotionally and mentally taxing thing to be doing because failure is so prevalent throughout of it. When you're practicing something you can't do, you fail all the time, but actually that failure is really important. That's a stepping stone to being able to do the thing that you want to be able to do. So it's a feature, not a bug. You actually do need to fail in order to achieve things, right? So I notice in my own students, sometimes they're afraid of making mistakes. They're afraid of like the bad sounds that come out of the guitar, and they're afraid of doing the things they can't actually do. And what I try to recommend to them is, look, embrace the failures, embrace the bad sounds, because they're all part of the journey. And if you learn to become friends with them, don't vilify them, actually befriend them, they become actually, in some sense, an enjoyable part of the process, because you know that at the end of this road of failure after failure after failure, something good comes out at the end of it, and that's being able to play the thing that you couldn't play last week. There is this idea that gets perpetuated amongst musicians that you shouldn't make mistakes when you practice because mistakes will get baked into your playing as a permanent feature, and you'll have to unlearn them in the future. This is not true, fundamentally. It's not how people learn, and if you look at how you learned any other skill in your life, it was littered with failures and bad attempts, basically. The only time a mistake will get baked into your playing is if you don't realise you're making a mistake. So you need to be able to spot the mistakes you're making. So if you hear a bad note, don't ignore it. Don't pretend like it isn't there, because then it'll stay. Instead, try to fix it. Like, the bad note itself is not a bad thing, but ignoring the mistakes that you're making is going to be a barrier to your progress. So what you need to do is, don't worry about the mistakes, just make them like they're a necessary part of the journey, but don't ignore them, because if you ignore them, they won't disappear. Your practice session should focus on the things that you cannot do. When you sit down with the guitar, try to work on the things that you currently can't do. And then when you're mentally exhausted and you've had enough, then spend time doing and playing with the things that you can do. That's where play is, right? So you've got practice, which is working on the things you can't do, and play, which is spending time having fun, utilizing the skills that you've already acquired. There's 2 things that you can do with the guitar, but practice will make progress, play will maintain the skills that you already have. So once you're exhausted from practice, then it's time to play, then it's time to have fun. And obviously, use your temperament as a guide. If you don't only spend 10 minutes doing hardcore practice, then only spend 10 minutes doing hardcore practice and spend the rest of whatever your practice time is having play. Like, everybody's goals are different here. Just because Ice can spend an hour practicing doesn't mean that you have to. So figure out what that balance looks like for you. Experiment with it, as we talked about earlier, and through repetition and experimentation, you'll figure out what works best for you. So here's the exercise that I would give to students after we had a lesson discussing the ideas that we've discussed today. What you need to do is you need to go away now and conduct an evaluation of your own practice relative to the ideas we've discussed in this video. So take the sections of this video and compare what you're doing to what we've discussed today? Are you consistent? Do you have goals? Are you doing things that you can't do? By comparing what you're doing to what we've discussed today, you'll be able to find where the differences lie and then hopefully correct them so that you can start to make more progress. Once you've figured out where the deficits are, try to come up with solutions for them. Now, what might be a solution for me might not be a good solution for you. It's experimentation. So let's say you're not consistent, and you're not consistent because your life's really busy and you know it's really hard to find an hour to sit down with the guitar. It's like, okay, some suggestions that you could try for something like that, but you should try and brainstorm your own as well, because you know your life better than I know it. So what I would suggest to somebody in those circumstances is, okay, first try and find a fixed point in the day that you do something consistently. So maybe you always brush your teeth at 10 o'clock at night. I don't know. There's a really maybe you're just really consistent in that manner. See if you can pick up the guitar before you brush your teeth. 2 minutes with the guitar before you brush your teeth. Make that an anchor that you can attach the behavior to, and then who knows, maybe it'll grow from there. If you haven't got that slot in the day, as a consistent thing, try and find some other consistent time of day that you can do it. Another option, if you're a really conscientious person, is you literally calendar it in. It's like, right, I get home from work at 6:30 tonight. At 6:45, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to pick up my guitar. And it's literally on the calendar. There's an alert on my watch and there's an alert on my phone so that I can't forget. And as soon as that alarm goes off, I go and do it. And it might only be for 30 seconds, but at least I've picked it up. Again, you should brainstorm ideas for yourself to figure out what would work here. But if you're not consistent and you've got these deficits in your practice area, try to come up and experiment with ways to make them work. And when you find something that does work, there you go, you've fixed the problem, right? In the lesson pack for this lesson, you'll find more exercises that will help you think about and structure your practice sessions so that they can be more effective. Or if you'd like to learn more about this, then you can check out my free ebook, Perfect Practice. The link is in the description, and there's loads of information in there that you could use to improve your practice sessions as well. Thanks for watching this week's lesson. If you learned something new, please leave the video a like and share the video with any guitar players that you think might find it helpful. If you've got any questions or thoughts, leave them in the comments below, and I will see you for our lesson next Saturday.